What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another perspective. It's been a minute. It's been a few weeks, and I'm back. Y'all miss me? I hope so. If not, that sucks. But no, I'm playing. Uh, Welcome if you're new, and welcome back if we're familiar. I'm your host, Jazz. This is another perspective, and today we are going to be talking about something that I feel like all of us has experienced or will experience at some point because we're human, right? You know, honestly, y'all, I'm excited. Today I'm going to be talking about burnout. And this episode might be a little longer than usual, so get your snacks, get your drink. I got mine. Sipping on some tea today. And if you're working out or if you're cleaning up, tap in with me, lock in. I just want to say, like, this episode exists because I'm having to listen to my own body and my spirit, even though my mind would prefer me to do something differently. You see, as humans, we have the capacity to become stressed, overwhelmed, and exhausted. And a lot of times we will overlook the way that stress impacts both our mental and physical well being because we're too busy just trying to survive. So today I'm going to share with you all my recent experience with burnout, and then I'll expand the conversation into where and how burnout shows up in ways that we can all commonly relate to it, whether it's at work, in our relationships, in our identity, in our everyday expectations. We'll talk about hustle culture. We'll talk about survival mode. We'll talk about where alignment should exist so that burnout doesn't. We'll talk about all these things. So, with that said, I'll start with my experience. Let's hop into it, all right? Just a quick recap. If you listen to the previous episode, it was very short. But it connects directly to today's topic because, I started recognizing that I was burning myself out through my own self-sabotaging behaviors. When I started this podcast, I was very focused. I was very locked in. I was hyper focused. And that made sense because it's something that I've always been wanting to do for a long time. But I also realized that I was beginning to idealize it in a way that was not healthy. I started viewing the podcast as a means to an end. And for me, that would be, freedom from my 9 to 5. Which I am so ready to get up out of there. Y'all don't understand. But listen, I told myself that if I worked twice as hard, the podcast would gain more traction, would grow faster, opportunities would come sooner, and I could support my community more, and I could leave my job quicker. You see, I let the reality of feeling stagnant and unfulfilled in my own career begin to dictate what my efforts looked like toward my dream, which is a headspace that a lot of us will start the grind from, simply because, we're ready to move on to our next chapter. We're ready to quit that job that we can't stand, right? You see, I started to place a certain importance on my dream. But you see, when urgency leads the build, pressure and overwhelm will follow. You see, I started to place an importance on how often I needed to post. And at the time, once a week seemed rational and doable for me. Until I started to realize, how hard I needed to push, the type of work I would need to put in to push out an episode every Sunday. I didn't consider the cost of my energy. And then that pressure is slowly started to take form, and show up on a daily basis for me. Running off a little sleep. I was skipping meals. I was feeling irritable. I was feeling impatient. Because, all the energy that naturally went into me taking care of myself and grounding myself was being redirected into my work. Yeah, I really felt like I was working 2 full-time jobs. And you know what? Some of us think that's normal and expected. That when you're doing something, exhaustion is a part of the process. Sacrificing and abusing our health and our well-being for survival and financial gain is just normal. But this is what conditioning has taught us. This is what conditioning of hustle culture has taught us. That if you're not exhausted, then you're not committed. That if you're not sacrificing your sleep, you're not serious. And if you're not overwhelmed, well, you're not building something meaningful. And while that can work for some time, is it truly sustainable? You see, I had to pause and ask myself this. I had to pause and ask myself, how effective can the outcome be if I am not well? If my body is depleted, if my mind is foggy, if my spirit is irritated instead of inspired. Because personally, I believe that I can create more, I can create better when I am well. But that's when I had to realize a deeper truth. That I wasn't building from alignment. I was building from a sense of urgency. I was chasing. And it's common knowledge to know that usually when you're chasing something, it implies that something is running from you. You see, when you approach building from a reactive headspace, it creates a chasing energy instead of sustainable momentum. And I'm not the type of person where I want to chase my dreams. No, I want to attract. I want to align with it, but never chase. So then I had to ask myself an even harder question. Was I building something aligned with my well-being and my impact? Or was I trying to outrun my current reality? This awareness only settled within me after I allowed myself to pause and slow down. Slowing down gave me the clarity on what was working, what wasn't, and what needed to shift. But here is where I want to switch gears and expand a little bit, because you see, this doesn't only show up in business or only for me. It shows up for all of us in some way. We can experience this at work. We can experience this in relationships, in our friendships, in our own identities, and even with life's expectations. Overextending yourself, overgiving, overperforming, until eventually your own body or circumstances forces you to slow down. But you see, sometimes we want out so badly that we start grasping for straws instead of responding with strategy. Not realizing that strategy is what creates the alignment so we can actually receive support and reward from an opportunity instead of just surviving through it. When we build off of impulse without strategy, we end up in predicaments and in situations that we don't necessarily want to be in. I mean, I see it all the time. I always see people surviving in the meantime. when they'd rather be doing something else. You probably see it too. You see people, they want to leave that job, but they feel tied to it because they need that income to survive. They're doing everybody else's job, including their own. Or they might simply don't even feel equally appreciated or compensated for what they do. They may not know what they want to do next, or maybe they do have other aspirations, but then they feel like they have to submit to letting life live them because they don't have the mindset. They don't have the proper positioning to act on figuring it out, to act on implementation. Some of us don't have the energy after we get off of a job that same day to go home and do further research, learn a little bit more, to explore a little bit more. But see, even if you do, sometimes it can feel like it's too much effort, too much energy to shift your life in a way that supports your goals. So then the leap feels scary, right? And then that fear creates stagnancy. But this doesn't only show up at work. You see, it can look like feeling stuck in a relationship or a friendship if you're not strong enough to let go in that moment. It can look like needing space to breathe without feeling smothered, possessed, controlled, or even misunderstood. And we can talk about it because I've been there. It can look like being the anchor for everyone else around you. The person that everyone calls when they're in a bind, or the person that everyone calls to emotionally dump on. But then you get tired. You get tired of being the support. You get tired of understanding people who don't even understand themselves or you. You get tired of saving people who don't even try to save themselves because they secretly don't even want to be saved. Even down to our identities, y'all. Exhaustion from the mask you wear to protect yourself, to fit in, to feel less judged. Exhaustion from people pleasing. Consistently doing things with minimal appreciation or consideration in return. And that's just sometimes because genuinely you care. You just care. Not even because you expect it back, but damn. But we do this because at times maybe there can feel like a hidden fear of not being liked, not being wanted, not being supported, not being felt, not being seen. And we fear this from people who they don't even like themselves, y'all. They don't even see themselves, y'all. They don't even feel themselves, y'all. Or even the fear of just simply losing someone. Sometimes we hold on to people who cannot show up for themselves the way that you show up for them. And even a step further, life's expectations. Sometimes this can look like the loss of everything you thought would become or you thought would always be. Whether it's emotional or physical, whether you didn't get the opportunity, whether you lost the job, whether you lost the relationship, whether you lost the friendship, whether you lost the loved one, whether you lost the argument. There's overwhelm of suffering and exhaustion from the grief that can sometimes feel beyond repair. So the question becomes, how do we heal all of this? How do we protect ourselves from the burnout that comes with the ebbs and the flow of life? And before I get into this, I will add a disclaimer because no, I'm not a licensed professional, but I'm a person who have experienced a lot of these things. And I'm going to share with you how I'm getting through it. So if you do find something in the solutions that worked for me and you feel like they will work for you, use at your own discretion and your own risk. Because yes, while it'll likely be effective, I can say that it's not a walk in the park to get through. This show is for entertainment purposes only. So y'all don't come to try to sue me for emotional damages, because I ain't got the money for that. The question becomes, how do we get our energy back? How do we realign? How do we support ourselves? How do we return back to ourselves? How do we get in alignment when burnout shows up in all of these areas of life? Well, first, we pause and slow down. Allow yourself to be, to feel. If it's for an hour, if it's for a day, if it's for a week, hell, even a month. Some of us need a year or a few, depending on what's going on. Take a moment to reflect. Where are you affected? What brought you into this heightened state that you are currently in? Then identify your why. What actually brought you here? What is your end goal? What is your reason for overextending? Then identify where you are right now, realistically, in your life. Whether it's at work, in your connections, from heartbreak, in your expectations, emotionally, spiritually, physically, you know how it go. Then identify the space that you would like to be in and grow into. Let's not worry about how we gonna get there yet. Just take a minute, take a moment to imagine, how would that feel? What is your vision? What would that look like to you, for you? You see, this is where we begin removing the exhaustion that isn't necessary for you to make progress. This is where we see where we've been going against the tide and what it's been costing us. This is where we recognize what's within our control and begin accepting what isn't. And that's the hardest part. Acceptance. Releasing control. You see, that alone plays the biggest part in why we feel pressure, why we feel burned out, why we struggle to stabilize ourselves. Because you see, as humans, we try to control everything. Time, environment, other people, outcomes. Hell, even if we could, we would try to control the weather, y'all. And a lot of people will argue that there's people that's already doing that. What you talking about? And I'm not denying that. What I'm saying is, often our need for control happens without awareness. We don't like to sit with the idea that not everything is ours to control. But check this out. There is a time to know when to push. There is a time to know when to pull back. We have to be able to honor our humanity. And when I say that, I mean honor the fact that you are a sentient being. You're not a robot. Except that you have the ability to feel without disregarding those feelings for a false sense of security or a false sense of success. Because y'all, just a question. What does success really look like if you're working 10 to 12 hour shifts, multiple jobs, paying for a life you barely have the energy or time to experience and appreciate. Maybe you're overworked. Maybe you're underpaid. I don't know. That sounds exhausting to me. Because guess what? You suffer. Your health suffers. Your sleep suffers. Your relationship suffers. Again, your time suffers. That's the hidden cost. And yeah, while you may get something from it, nobody is going to tell you how depleting it is to get there. I'll tell you though. I've been told, well, at least I have security. You think you have security. Let me tell y'all something. People are losing jobs every day. And sometimes it's not even their fault. It's just because the world we're currently living in should be happening. And I'm not saying this as a way to introduce fear or instill fear. But we got to get real. So look, what does it look like? What does success look like? What does it look like in relationships when you're the only one keeping everything afloat? You're pouring in emotionally, but you're not receiving it back. You're not seen. You're not felt. You're not heard. You're not valued. Sometimes you're lied to, even manipulated. And you accept crumbs in exchange for the whole loaf of what you're giving. Yet, you will sacrifice your well-being just so you can say that you're not alone. That's overextension too. And lastly, because I'm not gonna overload y'all with examples, but I just need to give some understanding. I need for this community to understand this. How successful can we feel if loss becomes the only thing that is shaping our identity? And we forget that our happiness, our healing, our evolution still matters. Whether it's experiencing loss through distance or unfortunately through death. Sometimes I think it's worth it to reflect on not only what that loss has done to us, what that loss has shown us, but what has the experience of having that opportunity, of having that person shown you? Not only about that person, but about yourself. I'll say this, y'all. Unfortunately, life happens. But what we do have the power over, what we do have the control over, what we do have the influence over is our response to it. And it starts with acceptance. Acceptance of where we are, where we want to be, where we are not yet, where we're going. Once you accept with intention, then from there you have the opportunity, you have the ability, you can explore, you can learn, you can make a plan, you can make different decisions for yourself. You can love yourself differently. It's about knowing when to lean in, knowing when to pull back, knowing when and where and how to protect our energy. That's balance. That's boundaries. That helps to create sustainability. That helps to create growth. Because, ultimately what this conversation has boiled down to is the connection that burnout has to our responses to life. And I know that the feeling of fear can override what's rational at times, but don't be so caught up in your fears where it decides your direction and your speed in life. You see, because some of us are so busy going somewhere till we find out we've been going in circles. Burnout doesn't always look like falling apart or like chaos. Sometimes it can look like functioning while disappearing. So I'll say this to anybody that's still listening to this episode. Pick a destination. And if your mind changes about the where, about the how, about the why, please know that you can always go back and make edits. You are not in this alone. You have community. This is community. You were given your vision for a reason. You are meant to co-create with God, with the universe, with the people around you. Take advantage of that opportunity. And please note that anything that is meant for you will not require you to reach it through exhaustion. Your plan, your intentions should always include you working smarter and not harder, with both strategy and pace. Your progress should respect your capacity. Strategy and planning, that matters more than how fast you get there. Take your energy back and recalibrate it. If this episode resonated for you, I beg you, take a moment, whether it's today, tomorrow, within this month, within this year, if you need to. Ask yourself, where am I moving from urgency instead of alignment? This was just another perspective, y'all. I'll see y'all next week. Oh, I forgot, we doing bi-weekly now, so no, not next week, but I'll see y'all again soon. Peace.